How can we cheat physics with a displacement boat? Welcome back to Sail Love. Today we're going to go into electric boats. Can any boat be electric, and why did I choose this boat to turn into electric? Now, the truth of it is, of course, any boat can be electric. It's quite simple. You just take out the engine, replace it with a motor. Ta-da, job's done. Happy days. But the thing is, do you want range? How successful is it going to be? And what's the reality of that? Now, the thing is, you can just do that. It's absolutely fine. And I've no issues with anyone doing that. And we've got friends that do that. And we've got friends who run around in diesel engines. The thing is, why did I think this one would be good? As a place to start, it's right here. Now basically, it's all about efficiency, isn't it? It's like, when you look at successful electric boats like the Optimas and things like that, and we've got the Candelas. The Candelas are foiling, the Optimas are on basically a fancy looking trimaran kind of thing. They've all got one thing in common: super, super light and next to no drag. So drag is your enemy, because we've got to push something through the water. And you know, we've got inverse cube laws, inverse square laws. The long and short of that is, to push a boat faster, we need a hell of a lot more power. It's not a linear scale. So how can we cheat physics with a displacement boat? Okay, that's what we're looking at here. So obviously a displacement boat, and this angle here is super fine. And the reason that this fine entry exists is because we have a bow wake, right? We create a bow wave. We have the myth of hull speed. That's for another story, the old hull speed thing. It does exist, but you can get around it. Hull speed comes from basically not being able to overtake your bow wave. The front is what creates the bow wave. Before we get to hull speeds, we want a boat which can go fast in light airs. So this is like below hull speed, about 8 knots on this or something. So how are we going to do that? We're going to do that by reducing the size of the bow wave. To reduce the size of the bow wave, we need to think of a knife through the water as opposed to your fist through the water. It's going to create less of a wake, less of a wave, and therefore there's less resistance, there's less water displaced. And that's the theory behind super fine entries. This boat's like super fine entry going back 3-4 meters, which means that there's not much space inside. The bow is tiny. The sleeping quarters at the front. It's not a big area, but to me, that's good. Other boats like this, maybe your ex-yachts and things like that, the Pogos, the old ones. We move into the new ones, and we got Scow Bows and things like that in race boats and the likes. But these are great. These totally flip the idea, and they could be good for electric too. But for me, wanting to go to the Patagonia, I don't like the idea of going upwind with a huge volume area, because every time we hit a wave, it bounces that up into the air, and then we're on the plane. So the boat will go faster, it would hydrogenerate better, and take less effort to move, but that's not going to be very comfy for long-term passages and trying to make some sandwiches on the go. You'd cut my fingers off, wouldn't it, me? So, moving back, this boat is 3.8 meters wide. She's 12 meters long. So basically, as a rough guide for standard sizing, the beam is 1/3 of its length. That's just a general rule. You can go way beyond that or way narrow, and this is something interesting. Go back to the old wooden boats, which is what I trained to build, right? They were always super skinny, like really narrow beams. And that's because it took less effort to push through the water. Again, displacing less water side to side, moving less water around. That was because they didn't have engines. And like my old 1907 gaff rigger that I used to have, that didn't have an engine. So a lot to be thought about there. If you're moving something by hand or you had to sail in light airs, the ticket was always reduce your beam. So this one's about standard, but as we come down, waterline, she's quite a bit narrow. She's about 3.4 meters at the waterline. Now, this is a bit like the Rob Humphreys designed Azuri 40, or was it the 41? One of the two, the later one. And their idea behind designing this boat was narrow at the back as well, which means that your upwind performance is better. So basically, waterline length is great for speed, but we also have something called skin friction, which is the amount of hull touching water. Not around the perimeter, but the whole surface area. So if we look at older boats like the big Oysters, the Westerlies, the Moody's, the 1970s, 80s built boats, there's a lot of boat beneath the water, a lot of skin friction. So again, looking at the inverse laws, the more friction we add, the much more power we need. So that means that your electric range is going to diminish enormously. Moving on to drag from there, that makes us look at appendages like keels and rudders and things like this. Putting on 2 units like Dan and Kika and Sailing Uma. Great guys, and they're putting on 2 ocean vaults. It's interesting because you're increasing drag. And we all know that like putting a folding prop on, as opposed to an open fixed prop, can save us around half a knot to 3/4 of a knot. So you would presume you're going to lose at least a knot by putting an extra leg on there. So the question is with physics, is that diminishing returns? Putting an extra leg on for the power you're going to get versus the drag you're going to get. So that's something to think about. This boat has a lift keel. For me, that was great. Absolutely great. I love a lift keel. It's also a daggerboard keel, not swing, which I actually really like, and at the same time I don't like. But it's always one of those things, isn't it? It's always a case of, you know, we rob Peter to pay Paul with boats. It's always like that. So I'll go into all of the keel design and why I like it and that side of it in another video. But in this instance, being able to lift the keel is reducing that friction. It's reducing that wetted area, and that for me was a good thing. And again, waterline's pinned out here on this boat. She's got, I think, below waterline, she's only 0.4 of a metre deep. Or 0.5 is it? Something like that. It's very shallow. Might be 0.6. I might be getting it all wrong. But nonetheless, it's quite a shallow boat and there's not a lot of boat in the water, which means skin friction is to a minimum. And I think that's really, really important. Now on this boat as well, like I say, it's Achilles heel. Every boat has an Achilles heel. This boat's Achilles heel. And these 2 things, we've got 2 rudders. Now, going into the whole friction matter, then we've got 2 instead of 1. Now they are smaller, which means it's not like we're doubling, but the problem we have is we're creating more drag, and of course if we can fly a rudder, then we're in a position where we're in a win-win situation because we've got less drag off the rudder. Now, put this simply, right? Rudders are on an angle like so. As the boat heels over, it ends up dead plumb, okay? So that means that we don't have any weather helm. Weather helm, for those who don't know, as the boat heels over on a single rudder and we start turning, we're pushing the bow of the boat up or down into the water, and it's that moving of the whole boat which is causing this huge amount of heave we're having to pull along with the wind and the sails. So reducing the size and flying a rudder would be great, but I don't think this boat's wide enough to do that. We'll see. I don't think so. But yeah, other things to look at are drag again in the system at the back here. We've obviously got a cutlass bearing here. We've got a shaft driven boat. Quite cool. This boat, all of its weight is in the middle. That's another story though. The engine's in the middle. Is a sail drive better? That's something I'm going to do some research into. I'm actually going to trial both on this boat to actually find out which one has the best hydrodynamics and which one gives us the best performance. Because again, basically electric boats, if you want it to perform, it's about reducing drag and reducing the amount of effort to move the boat. So can you create something light? Now surprisingly enough, this hull that she lies here is considerably lighter than our old Naiad 373 that we had. So despite being an aluminium expedition vessel, she's quite light. She's about 3 tons as she stands there. So weight of the boat as well is a big thing, and that's again when we look at repurposing an old boat and going electric. Sure, you can do it, and I think it's cool that people are doing it, But there's a limit to how much success we can have, and that's just the law of the physics, right? What else can you do to make the boat better? Anti-fouls, things like that. Burnish the bottom like a race boat. We're going to go with a silicon, and silicon's super slippy, so obviously growth is not a good thing. We can wipe it, we can clean it. We're going to go with ultrasonic electric anti-foul as well in a bid to keep that even cleaner. That's one thing. Lifting the keel, obviously. But the other thing we've got, obviously, is the rig. Flying head sails. We've got a bowsprit here, which is another reason I like this boat. It's not a particularly huge bowsprit. I would like it to be longer. Maybe we'll put a longer one on. Flying head sails, flying a spinnaker with a lot of volume at the top. We can now lift the boat up. If we lift the boat up and out, we're able to reduce the drag on the boat. So effectively we're taking it from being, the boat's effectively acting like it weighs less because it's not down in the water as deep as it was. And other things which help us do that, the boat pivots as it's pulled, and we've got a really flat area here. So the boat is super flat here, and it's quite wide, and it's flat that way. So the camber is flat, and the dead rise, which is the curve to the side, the rise to the side, is also flat, which means that when pressure is placed here, it's displaced over a larger area. So the stern doesn't want to sink down, which means you're more likely to plane. That's the theory behind this. So again, all of these things move towards a boat which can perform better while still being a displacement boat. Yeah, that's why I think I've got a bit of a chance. And I'm going to go all out to make it work. Carbon rigging to reduce the weight aloft. That means we can reduce the bulb size, which means reducing the bulb size reduces the drag. There we have it there. We'll find out what the best propulsion system is. We'll put the biggest set of sails on it that I can to make this thing move. We're going to reduce the drag in the sails as well. So that's going to be getting rid of like furlers and things like that wherever we can to increase the performance in the forward motion. And inside, I'm going to start off by sailing this boat completely empty to see how realistic it is. With an empty boat, built the way this one is, if that doesn't work, we reassess the whole situation and say, let's go with a diesel. And at that moment, we'll find out. So, I hope that was of interest to you. Be interesting to hear what people think, their thoughts, what they've done to reduce drag, and also think what people think about electric in general. Where do people's thoughts lie with it? Is it a good idea? Is it a bad idea? But yeah, do like, do subscribe, and if you've got any questions, I'm thinking about doing live streams. So we can basically knock ideas around, help each other, get answers from each other, and I'm more than happy to basically answer questions as a shipwright to anybody who's got questions. So, until next time, see you later.